satraps to be over the whole kingdom, and over these 3 governors, whom Daniel was one, that the satraps might be given account to them, so that the king would suffer no loss. So satraps was meaning princess, not a princess, but a prince, plural. Okay, and so what had happened is when Daniel had given the interpretation to Belshazzar, he became a governor. He lifted him up after that. So Daniel was already in a position because of what he had shown King Belshazzar, but let alone he did pass away in that chapter before, but he was raised up before that. So now when King Belshazzar had passed away, Darius had taken over. So Darius was pleased, and he was happy that he did have princess 150 around the whole kingdom. Now going in verse 3, it says, "Then this Daniel distinguished himself above the governors and satraps because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king gave thought to setting him over the whole realm." So when it's talking about then this Daniel distinguishes, meaning to show one's skill and leadership ability. See, it wasn't nothing that Daniel had done, but it was what God had given him. If you continue to read, it says, himself above the governors and satraps because an excellent spirit was in him. It was the Spirit of God. It wasn't the spirit of himself. It wasn't the spirit of something else. It was because of the excellent spirit in him. See, he did not have to do anything extraordinary to get any type of recognition. This was Daniel putting his faith in God, and then God was making room for him. So it was recognized that Daniel had something in him. And so this is why he was lifted up, and Darius trusted him because he knew that he would look out for the best interest for him and the kingdom. And in this, we have to remind ourselves, as it continues to say, and the king gave him thought, setting him over the whole realm. See, this is a good example, and this is something that we can take in. That when we put God above everything and God first in all things, that he will make a way for us. And that's in anything. It doesn't matter in the situation or circumstance that you're in, but God will make a way for you. But we're going to continue in verse 4, where it says, "So that the governors and satraps sought to find some charge against Daniel concerning the kingdom." So these guys were upset. They didn't want Daniel to have no part of it. So now they're looking at him. And it says, "But they could not find no charge or fault, because he was faithful." Faithful, that's such a terminology that we don't like. Faithful is meaning it's described as a faithful man without negligence or corruption. Man, they couldn't find nothing on this guy because he was faithful. Nor was there any error or fault found in him. Isn't that nice when someone cannot find anything wrong with you? You know? That they try to dig into the past, they try to dig in deep, and they try to find something that they can hold you accountable for to make a bad name out of you, but yet they couldn't even find anything. So here they are, they're talking with themselves, and they're like, man, this guy's faithful. There's nothing that we can find on him. And I'm telling you this because as long as we remain faithful to Christ, there will be people that are going to try to come against you. There are going to be people trying to speak something against you because they don't like you. Why? Because sometimes in their eyes you seem perfect. You seem like you have life together. You seem like you have everything going on together. But in reality, you yourself know that life's a struggle at times, right? You're trying to go into the next day living that life of faith, and you don't know how you can get back into next week. But people don't see that part. People don't see the struggles, the fights, the temptations, the compromises that we just have to say no to because compromises do come. But now I'm getting ahead of myself. Look, in reality, just because you're doing good doesn't mean you're not going to get picked on. You're not going to get picked on. That's like the schoolboy, like Zodiac was saying. If you're a nerd in high school and you're doing good in high school, you're getting straight A's and nothing is wrong, don't think that there's a bully looking at you. saying, hey, I want you to do my homework. Or, hey, you're too smart for me and you make me look bad. I'm going to beat you up. Look, there's always something that's going to come against you. But it's where your faith is at. It's, are you faithful? Is there a reason why someone is coming against you? Verse 5, it says, then these men said, we shall not find any charge against this Daniel unless we find it against him concerning the law of his God. Oh, here we go. Now they're talking about not the physical part. Now they're talking about the God part. Against him concerning the law of his God. So these governors and satraps thronged before the king and said thus to him, King Darius, live forever. All the governors of the kingdom and administrators and satraps, the counselors and advisors have consulted together to establish a royal statute and to make a firm decree that whomever petitions any god or man for 30 days except you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. Look, these guys were desperate. Now they're going to the king and they're saying, oh, king, I want to tell this, we want to bring this up to you. Let's set a law saying that only you can pray to any god, only that you can do this. And if anyone else comes against this, then they're going to be in trouble. See, they did not have any problem rushing in to find some type of issue. Let me scoot back a little bit. They knew Daniel was faithful. And in Daniel being faithful, they knew that he prayed. They knew he sought the Lord. And Daniel did this 3 times, each and every day. And if you caught that, what it said in verse 5, it says that they could not find any charge that this Daniel, unless we find it against him concerning the law of his God, they were going to try to make him compromise. They wanted to put this law into effect to make him stop doing what he loved to do best. And that was to pray to God. And so they're going that further step and they're trying to set things in order to set up a trap for him. So we'll continue to finish this real quick. And it says in verse 8, now, O king, establish the decree and sign the writing so that it cannot be changed, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which does not alter. Therefore, King Darius signed the written decree. This law was made up by 2 kings. One was Darius the Mede and Cyrus the Persian. And what they did is when the 2 kingdoms came together, they did this to make themselves stronger and to help get their religion where they wanted it to be. So it was made up laws between these 2 kingdoms. So these guys were plotting, since they could not find nothing else against them, and telling them, hey, do this law so that we can hold him accountable. But they didn't say that because King Darius loved Daniel. So he had no clue, no idea what was going on, but it seemed like a great idea. So that's what he did. And in this, what they were trying to gain was to get Daniel to compromise his relationship with God. They're trying to get Daniel to stop what he was supposed to be doing. They didn't want him praying to God, so therefore they asked the king to set a law to stop him. So they're being sneaky. They're going behind his back, him not knowing, but he knew. But the king didn't know who this was about. If the king knew who this was about, then he would have said no to it. And how many times in our lives are we challenged to compromise our relationship with God? How many times are we challenged in this area? Because sometimes it doesn't take other people to come against that. All it takes is ourselves. All it takes is our thoughts, our opinions. Oh, this is what I feel, and this is what I'm thinking. And in that is where the compromise begins, because we begin to see that things could be better on the other side rather than what God is wanting to do in that specific thing that he's wanting to do in your life. And we compromise ourselves into doing things that we shouldn't be doing. Allowing ourselves to go a further step when we shouldn't be taking any steps forward, but standing in place and waiting for God to do the work. And in this, we ourselves have to examine our motives, have to examine our hearts, and ask ourselves, are we in that place of when we compromise? Now, the compromise, that will be between you and God. But we have to be awake and alert to this. In verse 10, it says, now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went home. So Daniel knew about this. So now he just went home. And in this upper room, with his windows open towards Jerusalem, he knelt down on his knees 3 times that day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as was his custom since his early days. Look, he didn't stop. He didn't stop. It's not that he didn't care. He feared God more than anything. It didn't matter what law was put into place, because that was man's law. It didn't matter what was trying to come before him, because he knew that as long as he put God first, then that was just it. Because as it says, it was his custom. It was his normal thing since early days. So he's been doing this whole time. So why stop now? And this is what we have to ask ourselves. Why stop now? If you're being pressured into something different that you know you shouldn't be doing, if you're being pushed into doing certain situations and you know that it's not right, after all these years of serving God, why allow ourselves to be pushed to do something different? Because it's someone else's liking, but it's not yours. It's someone else's conviction, but it's not yours. It's between you and the Lord. So do not allow yourself to be pushed into something else that you're not supposed to be in. It says in verse 11, then these men assembled and found Daniel praying and making supplication before God. Man, that tells me that these guys were hiding in the corner somewhere. They knew that he was going to pray, right? They knew that that window was going to open at this time. So we're going to hide around this corner. We're going to catch this sucker. We're going to catch Daniel praying, because you know what? He don't stop. This guy is faithful. So you know what? This is the reason we set things in order. We went to the king. We got it signed. Now we're just going to sit here and wait. So these guys are just sitting outside his bedroom window. What kind of creep is that? But they're sitting there and they're waiting for him to do this. And it says in verse 12, and they went before the king and spoke concerning the king's decree. Have you not signed a decree that every man who petitions any god or man within 30 days except you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions? The king answered and said, the thing is true according to the law, the Medes and Persians, which does not alter. So they answered and said before the king that Daniel, who is one of the captives from Judah, does not show due regard for you, O king, or for the decree that you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day. And the king, when he heard these words, was greatly displeased with himself, and he set his heart on Daniel to deliver him, and he labored till the going down of the sun to deliver him. And what it's meaning, he was displeased, meaning he was distressed with oneself, that he was in sorrow, that he was in pain. He had anxiety over this. Why? Because he loved Daniel. He didn't know that anything had to do with Daniel. And so when they're coming over here, he's like, oh yeah, I got to stand my ground. I made that law. Who was the one that came up against this? It was Daniel. Man, all of a sudden he was messed up. He was saddened. And all that day and all that night, he lost sleep because he was determined to save him. He was determined to do something for him. But in all, he wouldn't be able to as we continue to go on. It says, and the king, when he heard these words, he was displeased. Then these men approached the king and said to him, "Know, O king, that this law of Medes and Persians, that no decree or statute which the king establishes may be changed." In verse 16, so the king gave the command and brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions. But the king spoke to Daniel, "Your God, whom you serve continually, he will deliver you." There will be people in our lives that will always try to do the best for us, but they won't be able to succeed. They won't be able to help. Mom and dad will only be there for so long, as some of us have learned. Some of us are learning, and some of you are still growing. Mom and dad will not be there for long. And there's going to be times that you're in a situation that you're going to be asking for mom and dad, but no one's going to answer because they may be unavailable. Maybe the Lord took them. And the comfort of having that is no longer there. And it's important that we don't rely just on everyone else. There's only one person to rely on, and that's God. Because when you fall into a situation, you're not going to know on how to crawl out of it. You're not going to know how to get out of it. And all the best advice that people are going to give you is not going to be the best advice at all, because it's not going to touch you in your heart. It's not going to move you, because God can do that, and only do that at times in our lives when we really need to be moved. And it's at those times in our lives when we're really pleading out to Christ and we're like, I need something different. But he sends someone your way, you don't listen to them. You disregard them. You start thinking things about them like, what gives them the right to speak that to me? But maybe God sent them. Maybe God sent them to warn you, but you didn't heed to that advice. And King Darius, he was trying to save Daniel. He was doing the king, the one that can make the rules, the one that can break the rules, the one that can do anything. He couldn't save Daniel from being thrown into the lion's den. There was only one person that could save Daniel, and that wasn't the king. But in this, we have to know that it's God. God, God, God. He is the one that is able to save you. He is the only one that is able to deliver you. He is the only one to knock sense into you. Knucklehead. Because we don't want to listen. We don't want to listen. We want to sit there all grumpy. We want to sit there as if I don't really need this. And you're just lying to yourself. I sat there. I've done it plenty of times. I don't need this. This don't hit me. This doesn't have no effect on me. I go home, cry, Lord, speak to me. Help me, Lord. Send someone my way. Hello, did you listen to the message? Hello? I gave the guy a microphone. He still didn't want to listen. What do they call that when they do this? A noogie. Some of us need a noogie. Not spit out of a noogie. I don't want no spitting in here. But we do that. And we got to learn to be open. Sometimes we're working on the honest part. But it's about being open. And Lord, speak to me. I don't care if it's from a burning bush. Open my mind. Don't make me stand in amazement like, oh, wow, it's not even going anywhere. No, God's trying to speak to you maybe. Don't get the water hose and try to spray it for hours. It's not going to go out. But listen. Verse 17, it says, I'll start at 16. So the king gave the command, and they brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions. But the king spoke, saying to Daniel, your God, whom you serve continually, he will deliver you. So the king is speaking, and he's having faith for Daniel. And he's telling him basically the last words that he's going to hear. Then a stone was brought and laid on the mountain of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring, with the two signets of his lords, that the purpose concerning Daniel might not be changed. Now the king, it says, Now the king went to his palace and spent the night fasting, and no musicians were brought before him. Also his sleep went from him. Man, he was just out of it. He was losing on his sleep. Daniel was in the den with the lions, and now to him, he's stuck there. The stone has rolled in. Now he has nowhere to go. He can't climb out because he was thrown in. So who knows the situation that Daniel is facing right now? And I know at times in our lives, sometimes we feel like as if we're thrown into the lion's den. We feel helpless. We feel lost. We have no answers. There's no movement. But yet, there's things around us that it seems like they're coming against us, and that there's no hope. Imagine being in the lion's den, having to face man-eaters, having to face a circumstance which you can't get out from. There's no escape. What would you do then? And we can feel this way. And I'm telling you, the way that we can escape this is not look at our circumstances. It's not look at what we're going through. It's not to look at what we're having to overcome, because God has overcome. It's not seeing, Lord, I'm still waiting on answers, because God has the answer. You're just being impatient. It's about waiting and looking into the eyes of that one thing that is coming against you and giving it to God. Knowing that you're not alone in it. You have to believe it. People will believe it and they will speak it to you, but you have to know it. And when you face those things that want to tear you down, want to tear down your faith, want to tear down your trust, want to tear down your relationship with God, this is when you have to stand. You have to stand and know that God is God. And that just because this time in your life you may be feeling lonely, what about the remainder of the years that you had before? And what about afterwards, what God has promised you? These are the things that we must focus on so that we won't die off. So that our relationship with God will not go away. For that our trust in Him will not deplete, but it will grow. It'll grow because you continue to press Him, because you continue to trust in Him. And that day when that certain circumstance is done and you've been delivered, you can give God praise, not yourself for being strong, not yourself for saying, I did it, I stood strong through it all. No, it was your faith. It was because you sought God in it. It's because you trusted God in it. And God gave you that. So believe. No one may understand your situation, but God does. That's the cool part. There's always God that understands us, even though we don't understand ourselves at times. We don't. We're cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. I know you like that cereal. Verse 20. It says, after the king has lost his sleep, he was fasting, no music, so he wasn't partying. So he went, in verse 20, he said, and when he came to the den, he cried out with a lamenting voice to Daniel. The king spoke, saying, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions? Then Daniel said to the king, O king, live forever. My God has sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, so that they cannot hurt me, because I was found innocent before him. And also, O king, I have done no wrong before you. And when he's talking about I have been found innocent, meaning not guilty of the charges that were alleged against him. Daniel was tried to be persecuted. In God's eyes, he was innocent. Can you imagine that? escaping something like that, and then to come out of it, and for your faith to be refreshed, for everything that you so desired to do for God has come alive once again. And I'm telling you this because today you're at that edge. You're at that edge of, I don't know. I'm struggling in my faith. I'm struggling in my hope. Because I am facing persecutions. I am facing something that I don't know how I'm going to overcome. There are obstacles in my life that I don't know if I can ever get over. But once you face it and let God deal with it, then when God gets all the glory, then you are made stronger. Your faith is refreshed. Your outlook, your relationship with God flourishes even more. See, the thing is, it's about stepping into the will of God. And that's what it really is. In verse 23, it says, "Now the king was exceedingly glad for him and commanded that they should take Daniel up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no injury whatever was found on him, because he believed in his God." Because he believed in his God. That's something that's just, it's believing and it's believing and doing. There's two differences. We all can be believers, but what are we doing about it? What are we doing in it? Because I could say I have a relationship with God, but does it show? Is it evident? Does it show any fruits of it? And this is the part that I like. And I didn't want to put nothing on here like this. It says in verse 24, "And the king gave the command, and they brought those men who had accused Daniel, and they cast them into the den of lions." So he got those suckers that were coming against him and got them and threw them in the lion's den. Them, their children, their wives, and the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones in pieces before they ever came to the bottom of the den. Man, I wasn't going to put that up there for the illustration. I'm pretty sure you could get that. Broken bones, they didn't even hit the floor. They didn't even touch the floor. God had his way. God fought the battle. God did it. Daniel didn't have to do nothing. He just had to stay faithful. It was that simple. Faithful, simple. That, just do it. You got to face it. You got to face it. If you don't face it, what are you going to do for the rest of your life? There's going to be a time and a day in your life, you got to face it. You got to face it, or each and every day, it's going to face you. And you're going to find yourself in that same predicament each and every day, wondering if something's ever going to change. But it's not until you give God that opportunity to prove himself right to you, that he is righteous, that he is faithful, and that he is willing to do whatever it takes. And look, the battle's not yours. It really isn't. We only can do so much. The battle isn't yours. It's giving it to God. It's pressing in. It's praying. It's keeping that relationship with him. That's all he's asking. He's not telling you to go and do crazy things out there. He's not telling you something out of the ordinary that you are incapable of doing. And I say it's simple because God always provides. He always gives. He always protects those that he loves. And that's each and every one of you. So don't think that you're nothing. Don't think that you're unprotected just because something in life happened. That's life. It happens. But it's about our stands that we make from that point on. What are we going to do from that point on? Are we going to let life get the best of us? Are we going to let life suffocate us? Or are we going to let God just have his way in our lives? Let God handle your situations. and always put Him first in all things. Amen.